into the forest. I had no reason to feel uneasy when I first set out that morning. The forest was alive with the signs of spring. The air was crisp, the sunlight filtering through the leaves in shimmering rays, and the ground was soft beneath my boots. The cold grip of winter had finally loosened, and I felt a sense of freedom as I walked deeper into the woods. It had been too long since I'd been out here, alone with nature. The drive to the trailhead had been uneventful, and after parking the car, I set off with a light pack and a clear mind. I had no particular destination in mind, just a vague plan to explore the deeper parts of the forest, the ones few hikers bothered to reach. The thought of being alone in such a vast space was calming. There was something about the stillness of the woods that soothed me, made me feel small in the best possible way. But as I moved further from the trail, that peace began to erode. It was subtle at first. The warm light of the morning seemed to dim slightly, the sun's rays filtering through the canopy less frequently. The trees were taller here, their branches more intertwined, creating a dense ceiling of leaves that blocked out the sunlight. I checked my watch, surprised at how fast the time had passed. Only an hour or so had gone by, but the light had already taken on a strange, late afternoon hue. A chill brushed across my skin. The air felt different. I ignored the unease creeping in and continued walking, eager to reach the stream I'd heard about from a local. The forest was supposed to be beautiful this time of year, full of blooming wildflowers and clear water. I wanted to see it for myself, to sit by the banks and feel that rush of serenity the wilderness always gave me. But the farther I walked, the more the forest seemed to shift around me. The trees, once familiar and welcoming, took on a twisted, looming presence. The branches hung low, almost like they were watching me. The sun was sinking faster now, too fast for the early afternoon. It barely made sense. I stopped, feeling the weight of the silence pressing down. There were no bird calls, no rustling of animals in the underbrush, just a heavy stillness that wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket. The light was fading unnaturally quickly, casting long, jagged shadows across the forest floor. My heart beat faster. I checked my watch again. The hands were stuck, unmoving. I tapped the glass, but the second hand refused to budge. No signal on my phone either. The sinking sun bathed the forest in an eerie orange glow, and suddenly I knew I was too far from the car. Much too far. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I had been walking for hours, or so it seemed, and the return path was unclear. I spun around, trying to retrace my steps, but the trees all looked the same, their dark forms twisting together into a dense labyrinth. My breath caught in my throat as the sun dipped lower, casting the entire forest in a deep shadow. Day was slipping away and night was coming far too soon. I could feel it now, an unnatural weight pressing down, urging me to leave. Something was wrong. Desperately wrong. My feet began to move faster and faster, cutting through the thickening fog that was rolling in from nowhere, curling around the trunks like ghostly fingers. The fog was unnervingly thick. I could barely see a few feet ahead, the trees now reduced to dark silhouettes in the haze. The ground underfoot grew uneven, roots and rocks tripping me up as I tried to push forward. I wasn't even sure which direction I was going anymore, just that I had to keep moving, keep cutting through the fog in the trees. And then, through the suffocating silence, I heard it. Help. It was soft, almost too quiet to hear. A voice, distant and faint, carried through the trees like a whisper on the wind. I stopped, my heart racing. Had I imagined it? I stood still, straining my ears against the fog and the encroaching darkness. Help. There it was again, a little louder this time. It was unmistakable now, a cry for help. The voice was thin, weak, but it was enough to stir something deep in my chest. Someone was out here. Someone else had gotten lost just like me. I took a step forward, my eyes darting through the fog. The shout came from somewhere off to my right, just beyond the tree line. Hello. I called out, my voice hoarse and shaky. Where are you? No answer. For a long moment, the only sound was the faint rustling of leaves in the wind. The forest seemed to hold its breath. And then the voice returned. Help. It was closer now. Almost too close. The voice came again, drifting through the fog like a cold breeze. Help. It was closer this time, far closer than before, yet impossibly soft. Something about it tugged at me, urging me to respond, to follow. But as I stood there, frozen in place, something deep inside me twisted with dread. The cry felt wrong, like a sound that didn't belong in this world. Something too hollow, too perfect, like a mimicry of a human voice but lacking the soul. I took a step back, my heart thudding in my chest. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get away from that voice, but my legs were slow to move, heavy with the weight of fear. Help. The word stretched out, lingering in the air like a poison. There was no urgency, no panic in the voice, just a cold, mechanical repetition as if it were testing the sound, adjusting to make it more convincing. A shiver ran down my spine, and I took another step back, eyes wide, scanning the trees for any sign of movement. The fog had thickened, swirling around the darkened trunks, making the forest feel tighter, more claustrophobic. Something was watching me. I could feel it. "Hello?" I called out, my voice barely more than a whisper. "Who's there?" Silence. Then, without warning, the voice came again, but this time it was right beside me, so close that I could feel the air shift with the sound. "Help!" I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. There was no one there, just the endless wall of fog and trees. My pulse quickened, fear creeping into every corner of my mind. I was no longer just lost in the woods, I was being hunted. I had to get out. I turned on my heel and started walking fast, each step heavy and uneven as I fought the urge to break into a sprint. The underbrush snagged at my legs, the uneven ground threatening to trip me with every step, but I didn't care. I just had to put distance between me and that voice. "Help." It followed me. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. Every few seconds the voice called out again, the same chilling word repeating over and over, but each time it was closer. I quickened my pace, my feet stumbling over roots and rocks as the forest closed in around me. The trees seemed to loom taller, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, scratching at the sky. The fog, thick and heavy, wrapped around me tighter, muffling the sound of my frantic footsteps. But the voice cut through everything. "Help." It was behind me now, almost at my back. It was no longer faint or distant. It was as if whatever was making the sound was walking right in my shadow, breathing down my neck. The word was no longer a cry, it was a demand. My skin crawled, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end as a deep, primal fear took hold. I broke into a run. Branches whipped at my face, scratching my skin, but I barely felt them. I could hear it now, footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, matching my pace. Something was following me. The forest seemed to warp as I ran, the trees twisting into grotesque shapes, the ground uneven and treacherous. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to get away. But the faster I ran, the closer it came. The voice was relentless. "Help." It was louder now, too loud, echoing unnaturally through the fog. It was no longer the sound of a human calling for help. It was something else. Something trying to be human but failing. There was a rawness to it, a distortion that sent waves of nausea through me with every repetition. The footsteps behind me grew heavier, closer, as though whatever was chasing me was gaining on me with every step. I could hear it breathing now, a low guttural rasp that made the air thick and foul. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I couldn't stop. And then the voice changed. "Help me." The words dripped with mockery now, each syllable twisted, as if it was enjoying the chase. The air around me grew colder, sharper, biting at my skin. I could feel it. Something big, something monstrous was right behind me. Its presence was suffocating, pressing down on me like a physical weight. My vision blurred with tears of panic, but I kept running, my legs moving on instinct alone. And then, I heard it. A low, wet thud, something heavy hitting the ground just behind me. It was no longer walking. It was crawling. I could hear the sound of its limbs dragging through the dirt, the sickening squelch of wet, leathery skin scraping against the forest floor. The voice was distorted now, broken and unnatural, like an old recording being played backward. "Help me." The words were stretched, pulled into something inhuman, something wrong. My breath came in ragged gasps as I pushed myself harder, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. But the thing behind me was getting closer. I could feel its presence growing, feel its hot, rancid breath on the back of my neck. Suddenly, I tripped. My foot caught on a root and I went sprawling forward, hitting the ground hard. The impact knocked the wind out of me, and for a moment, everything went still. I could hear my pulse pounding in my ears, feel the cool earth beneath my hands. My mind screamed at me to get up, to keep running, but my body was frozen in terror. Slowly, I pushed myself up onto my hands and knees, the fog swirling thickly around me. I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead, but I knew it was there. I could feel it, right behind me. I turned my head just enough to catch a glimpse. Through the thick veil of fog I saw it. A figure, crawling on all fours, its limbs long and twisted, its body covered in a sickly, blackened skin that glistened with something wet. Its face, if you could call it that, was distorted, stretched into a grotesque mockery of a human expression. Its mouth hung open, far too wide, its eyes black pits of nothingness. And as it moved, it called out again, its voice warping into a horrific, guttural snarl. "Help me." I scrambled to my feet, my entire body trembling with fear. I didn't look back again. I couldn't. I ran faster than I had ever run in my life, my legs pumping, my chest burning, the creature's distorted cries echoing behind me. But no matter how fast I ran, I could still hear it, crawling closer. And I knew it wasn't just hunting me, it was toying with me. I didn't have time to think. The moment I saw that thing twisted and crawling toward me, I knew I had to run. Every instinct in my body screamed for me to get away, but no matter how fast I moved, it was always there, just behind me, its wet, rasping breath filling the air. The creature's movements were horrifying, its long, disjointed limbs propelling it forward in grotesque jerks. But then, without warning, its pace shifted. It screamed, a deafening, guttural howl that ripped through the forest like a shockwave. The sound was monstrous, layered with tones too low and too high for any human voice. It wasn't a scream of pain or fear. It was a hunting cry, and then it began to run. The sudden shift in speed sent a jolt of pure terror through me. My legs were already burning from the sprint, but the sound of its rapid, pounding footsteps closing in behind me forced me to push harder. I ran blindly through the trees, the fog swirling around me in thick, suffocating waves. Branches slapped against my face, leaving cuts that I barely felt. The ground was uneven, full of roots and rocks that threatened to trip me with every step. But I didn't care. I couldn't stop. The creature's scream echoed again, closer this time, so close that I could feel the vibration of it in my chest. I risked a glance back just for a second and I saw it, a blur of dark, glistening skin and long skeletal limbs. It wasn't crawling anymore. It was upright now, its body hunched forward as it sprinted on two legs, its grotesque arms swinging wildly as it ran. It was fast. Too fast. I pushed harder, my muscles screaming in protest, my lungs burning with every breath. My mind raced, trying to figure out where I could go, where I could hide, but the forest seemed endless, stretching out in every direction like a never-ending maze. There were no landmarks, no clearings, nothing but the twisted trees and the choking fog. And still the creature gained on me. Its footsteps were heavy now, crashing through the underbrush with terrifying speed. I could hear the wet, slapping sound of its limbs hitting the ground, the guttural snarl that came from deep within its throat. My own breathing was ragged, shallow, as panic took over. Every inch of my body screamed for relief, for a place to hide, but there was nowhere to go. The fog was so thick I could barely see where I was going. I stumbled over a root, nearly falling, but I caught myself just in time and kept running. My vision blurred from the sweat dripping into my eyes, but I couldn't stop to wipe it away. Behind me, I could hear the creature's footsteps growing louder, faster. It was right there, just a few feet behind me, its breath hot and wet on the back of my neck. It screamed again, and this time the sound was so close it sent a wave of panic through me. I tried to run faster, but my legs were numb, my body barely responding. My vision tunneled, the trees and fog blending together into a blur of dark shapes. I couldn't think, couldn't focus. All I could do was run. But the creature wasn't slowing down. I felt a sharp sting on the back of my leg. A claw or a hand, I couldn't tell, grabbing at me, trying to pull me down. I kicked out wildly, my foot connecting with something solid. The creature let out a deep, angry snarl, but I didn't look back. I couldn't look back. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would burst out of my chest. My breaths were ragged, desperate gasps, and my legs felt like they were filled with lead. I was losing strength. My body couldn't keep up with the terror that was fueling it, and no matter how fast I ran, I could feel it. The creature was right behind me. The ground beneath my feet started to shift, becoming soft and slippery. I hadn't realized it, but I was heading into a bog. The earth sucked at my boots, threatening to pull me down with every step. My pace slowed as I struggled through the mud, but the creature didn't falter. It thrived in this terrain, its long limbs moving effortlessly over the swampy ground. The fog thickened even more, wrapping around me like a living thing, as if it were working with the monster to trap me. I could barely see a few feet ahead now, the world reduced to shadows and faint outlines. My breath came in short, panicked bursts, my legs heavy and sluggish. And then it happened. I felt it before I saw it, an immense weight slamming into my back, knocking the air from my lungs. I hit the ground hard, my face pressed into the mud, the taste of dirt filling my mouth. For a moment, everything went black. My ears rang from the impact, my body frozen in shock. Then I felt its claws. Sharp, jagged fingers dug into my shoulders, flipping me onto my back. I gasped, struggling to breathe as the creature loomed over me. It was massive, its body twisted and wrong, its skin a slick, blackened texture that glistened in the pale moonlight filtering through the fog. Its face, or what passed for a face, was a grotesque mask of stretched skin and hollow eyes, its mouth too wide, too full of teeth, grinning down at me. It screamed again, the sound a deafening roar that rattled my bones, and I could see the hunger in its dark, bottomless eyes. This was it. This was how it would end. I thrashed wildly, trying to kick, to claw my way free, but its grip was like iron. The creature leaned in closer, its hot, fetid breath washing over my face, and I could hear it muttering now, not the word help, but something else. Words I couldn't understand, spoken in a language that felt ancient, alien. My body was pinned to the ground, unable to move as its claws dug deeper into my flesh. Suddenly, it snarled, and with one swift motion, it yanked me off the ground, lifting me effortlessly into the air. I screamed, my voice lost in the fog in the night as it carried me through the forest. The trees blurred around us, the creature's speed incomprehensible as it bounded through the woods with terrifying grace. And then, without warning, everything went silent. The fog swallowed us whole, the trees vanishing into the mist. I couldn't see anything, couldn't hear anything but my own panicked breaths. The world around me disappeared, consumed by darkness. I felt the creature's grip tighten, its claws digging deeper into my skin. My vision blurred, my body going limp as the cold seeped into my bones. And then, we were gone.